Welcome to the Nordic Skald. Tonight's tale is one of Iceland's most beloved and enduring folk legends. For centuries it was told and retold during the long winter nights when people lived in isolated farms scattered across a vast and unforgiving land. In a world shaped by darkness, snow, and solitude, the boundary between the seen and the unseen often felt thin. From that world emerged stories of ghosts, hidden beings, and restless spirits. And few are remembered more vividly than the haunting tale of the DEACON of Dark River. So settle by the fire, listen closely, and journey with us into the mysteries of the polar night. River. A tale retold for the Nordic Skald. There are places in the north where time seems reluctant to move. Valleys where mountains stand as they have stood for 1,000 years, watching generations arrive and disappear like snowflakes carried across the winter wind. In such places, memories linger. Some settle into the earth, others drift through the darkness, and a few refuse to die. This is one of those stories. Long before roads crossed the wilderness and long before electric lights pushed back the shadows, there lay a lonely valley in northern Iceland. A river wound through that valley. In summer, it sang over stones polished by centuries of glacial water. In winter, it became something else entirely. The river froze beneath a skin of ice and snow, disappearing from sight as though the earth itself had swallowed it. Yet beneath that frozen surface, the water continued its restless journey toward the sea. The old people said that rivers remembered. They remembered footsteps. They remembered tears. And they remembered the dead. No one laughed at such things in those days, not during the long winter nights, not when the wind cried around the turf houses and darkness pressed against the windows like an unseen visitor. The people of the valley had learned long ago that there were mysteries in the world that no priest could fully explain. Some truths belonged to God, others belonged to the night. The winter of this story began with unusual beauty. The first snowfall arrived gently, not as a storm, not as a punishment, but as a blessing. Snowflakes drifted from a pale sky and settled softly upon the earth. The mountains dressed themselves in white. The lava fields disappeared beneath smooth blankets of snow. Even the roughest corners of the landscape seemed transformed. Children laughed, farmers nodded with approval. And for a little while the world appeared peaceful. Yet beauty often walks hand in hand with tragedy. No one knew that then, not the farmers, not the priest, and certainly not the young woman whose fate would become known across Iceland. Her name was Gudrun. Those who met her rarely forgot her, not because she was the most beautiful woman in the district, though many considered her lovely. No. What people remembered was the calmness she carried with her. It seemed to soften every room she entered. She possessed the rare gift of making others feel seen. The lonely found comfort in her company. Children followed her. Old people smiled when she appeared. She moved through life with quiet grace, like sunlight across still water. And without realizing it, she had stolen the heart of a young deacon. The deacon was a man of learning, a man of faith, a man whom the parish respected. His future appeared bright. The church valued him. The elders admired him, and many believed he would one day become a great minister. Yet whenever his thoughts wandered, they wandered toward Gudrun, toward her smile, toward the sound of her laughter, toward the future they dreamed of building together. Theirs was not the reckless passion sung about in drinking halls. It was something deeper, something stronger. Their love had grown slowly, like roots beneath the earth, like a river carving its path through stone. Each meeting had strengthened the bond between them until they could no longer imagine life apart. Marriage was expected. Everyone knew it. The question was not whether they would marry. The question was only when. And for a time, it seemed that nothing stood in the way of their happiness. But fate has little interest in human plans. As Christmas approached, darkness claimed more of each day. The sun barely climbed above the horizon before sinking once more behind the mountains. The nights grew longer. The cold sharpened. The stars appeared brighter than ever. And in those endless evenings, people gathered around their fires. Stories were told. Old songs were sung. Ancient memories awakened. The north itself seemed to be holding its breath. One evening, a few days before Christmas, the deacon saddled his horse and set out to visit Gudrun. Snow drifted across the valley. The sky hung low and gray. Yet his spirits were high, for every mile brought him closer to the woman he loved. The horse moved steadily through the winter landscape. Hooves crunched upon frozen ground. The wind tugged at the rider's cloak. Far above, ravens circled against the pale sky. The journey was long, but the deacon hardly noticed. Love has a curious way of shortening distances. By the time he arrived, twilight had already settled across the countryside. Golden light glowed from the windows of Gudrun's home. Smoke curled from the roof, and suddenly all traces of cold vanished from his thoughts, because she was waiting for him. Just as she always did, standing in the doorway, smiling. And for a brief moment, as snow drifted between them and the fading light painted her face with gold, he felt something close to perfect happiness. The sort of happiness that comes so rarely in life that one scarcely recognizes it while it is happening. If he had known what awaited him, he might never have left her side. The evening unfolded slowly, as winter evenings often did in those distant years. Outside, darkness gathered over the valley. Inside, warmth and candlelight held it at bay. Gudrun poured coffee into simple cups while the deacon removed his gloves and settled himself near the fire. The scent of burning birchwood drifted through the room. Shadows danced softly along the turf walls. For a while, they spoke of ordinary things: the sheep, the weather, the approaching Christmas feast. Yet beneath every word flowed the same quiet current. The future, their future. It lingered in every glance they exchanged, in every smile, in every silence. For there are moments between two people who love one another when words become unnecessary. The deacon watched her as she moved about the room. She was humming softly to herself, a melody he had heard before, a simple tune. Yet hearing it now filled him with a strange feeling he could not explain. A tenderness so deep it almost hurt, as though some hidden part of him already understood what the rest of him could not. That nothing beautiful remains forever. That every joy is fragile. That happiness often shines brightest just before darkness falls. Gudrun noticed him watching her and laughed. "You have hardly spoken for 10 minutes," he smiled. "I was thinking." "About what?" "About how fortunate I am." She shook her head. "You always say such things." "Because they are true." A faint blush colored her cheeks. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind rose slightly. The old house creaked. For a brief moment, neither spoke. Then Gudrun sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Tell me honestly," she said quietly. "Do you ever fear the future?" The question surprised him. "Fear it?" "Yes." She stared into the flames, as if something might happen. The deacon considered her words. Then he took her hand. His fingers were warm, steady, strong. "No," he said at last. "I do not fear the future." She looked at him. "Why not?" "Because whatever comes, we shall face it together." The answer seemed to satisfy her, yet later, long after she had fallen asleep, she would remember those words and weep. Hours passed. The storm outside strengthened. Snow hissed against the windows. The world beyond the farmhouse slowly vanished beneath darkness and blowing white drifts. When at last the deacon rose to leave, Gudrun immediately frowned. "You cannot be serious," he smiled. "I must go." "No." "Gudrun, no." She crossed her arms stubbornly. "The weather is worsening." "I know." "Then stay. I have responsibilities." "The church will survive one night without you." He laughed softly. "The church, perhaps. The congregation, certainly. But Christmas is near." She stepped closer. Concern clouded her eyes now. The playful mood had vanished. "Please." Only one word. Yet something in the way she spoke, it caused a strange unease to pass through him. An unease he could not explain. The room seemed suddenly quieter. Even the fire appeared to burn lower. For an instant, he almost agreed. Almost. Then duty prevailed, as it always did. I must return. The disappointment in her face pierced him. He drew her close. She rested her head against his chest. Neither spoke. The storm moaned outside like a distant voice. Finally, he kissed her forehead. I shall return on Christmas Eve. She looked up. Promise. I promise. Those would become the most important words he ever spoke, because some promises reach beyond death. The horse was restless when he emerged from the farmhouse. Snow swirled through the darkness. The wind struck his face immediately, cold, sharp, unforgiving. He mounted quickly. Gudrun remained in the doorway watching him, wrapped in a wool shawl, a small figure surrounded by warm candlelight. He lifted a hand. She waved back. Then he turned the horse toward home. Within moments, the darkness swallowed him. The last thing he saw was the faint golden glow from her window, a tiny island of warmth in a sea of blackness. Then even that disappeared. The valley felt different now. The storm had changed. The snow no longer drifted gently. It moved with purpose, driven by fierce winds descending from the mountains. The horse lowered its head and pushed forward. Hoofbeats echoed faintly beneath the roar of the storm. The deacon knew this route well. He had traveled it countless times. Yet tonight, familiar landmarks vanished almost immediately. The world became a blur of snow and darkness. The boundaries between earth and sky dissolved. Only instinct guided him. Only memory. The cold intensified. Ice formed in his beard. Snow gathered upon his cloak. Still, he continued. The image of Gudrun sustained him, her smile, her laughter, the future waiting for them. He thought of the house they would someday build, children running through summer fields, long evenings beside the fire, simple dreams, beautiful dreams, the sort that belong to ordinary people, the sort that fate often delights in destroying. Hours passed. The storm grew worse, far worse. The horse stumbled, recovered, stumbled again. The deacon peered through the darkness, trying to locate familiar features in the landscape. Anything, a hill, a rock, a fence. But everything looked the same. White, endless, silent. Then suddenly he heard it. Water. His heart tightened. The river. He had reached the crossing. Normally it posed little danger. Winter usually transformed it into a frozen road. But tonight, nothing seemed certain. The horse stopped, refusing to continue. The deacon dismounted. Wind tore at his cloak. Snow whipped across his face. He approached cautiously. The river lay hidden beneath snow and darkness. Impossible to see clearly. Impossible to judge. Yet he knew he could not remain where he was. The cold alone would kill him if he waited until morning. He listened. Nothing. Only wind. Only darkness. In all cases, only silence. At last, he made his decision. He led the horse forward, one step. The ice held. Another step. Still it held. A third. A fourth. The horse followed reluctantly. The deacon felt hope returning. Perhaps the danger had been exaggerated. Perhaps he would laugh about this journey tomorrow. Perhaps... A sharp crack shattered the night. He froze. The sound came from beneath his feet. The horse screamed. Another crack followed, louder, longer, and then the world vanished. The ice exploded beneath them. Black water surged upward. The river opened its jaws and swallowed them whole. The cold struck like a knife. The shock stole his breath instantly. Darkness closed around him. He reached upward, desperately, wildly. His hands struck ice, slippery, unbreakable. The current seized him, dragged him, twisted him. The horse vanished. The world became chaos. Water, darkness, terror. For one final moment, his mind found clarity. One final thought emerged above the panic. Not of God, not of death, not even of himself. Only of Gudrun. Waiting, believing he would return. Then the river carried him away into the darkness, and the valley fell silent once more. But death, as the old stories often remind us, is not always the end. Morning arrived slowly. A pale gray light crept over the mountains and settled across the frozen valley. The storm had spent much of its fury during the night. Now only a restless wind wandered through the drifts it had left behind. The world looked peaceful. Too peaceful, as though the land itself wished to conceal what had happened beneath the ice. No one knew the deacon was missing. Not yet. The people in the valley rose from their beds and began their daily work. Smoke rose from chimneys, doors opened, livestock were fed, life continued. As it always does, the living have a remarkable ability to move forward, unaware that tragedy is already walking among them. But by midday, concern began to spread. The deacon had not returned. At first, no one worried. Winter travel was unpredictable. Storms often delayed even the most experienced riders. By evening, the concern deepened. By the following morning, it had become fear. Men gathered, horses were saddled. Search parties rode into the snow-covered wilderness. The valley that had seemed so beautiful only days before now appeared vast and hostile. The mountains watched silently. The river kept its secrets. And somewhere beneath ice and darkness, the young deacon lay motionless, cradled in the cold embrace of the water that had claimed him. Yet his story was not finished. Not even close. Far away, Gudrun waited. At first she felt no anxiety. The weather had been terrible. Surely that was the explanation. Surely. She repeated the word often. Surely he had found shelter. Surely he would arrive tomorrow. Surely nothing terrible had happened. But as the days passed, certainty began to erode. Fear entered quietly, like a draft beneath a door, like a shadow lengthening across a room. On the third evening, she found herself standing by the window long after darkness had fallen, watching, listening, waiting. The snow outside reflected the faint glow of the moon. Every distant shape became a rider. Every sound became hoofbeats. Every passing moment deepened the ache in her heart. Still, he did not come. Christmas Eve arrived, the holiest night of the year. A night when families gathered, candles were lit, prayers were spoken, and the boundary between this world and the next was said to grow thin. The old stories often mentioned such things. Most people pretended not to believe them. Yet few felt entirely comfortable traveling alone after dark on Christmas Eve, especially in winter, especially in Iceland, especially when the dead had not yet been found. Gudrun dressed carefully that evening. A part of her felt foolish. Another part refused to surrender hope. He had promised. She could still hear his voice. "I will return for you." The memory lingered with unsettling clarity, as though the words had been spoken only moments ago. Outside, darkness settled across the valley. The wind moved softly through the snow. The stars shone brilliantly overhead. One by one, the farmhouses lit their candles, golden points of light scattered across the wilderness. Warmth, life, safety, against the vast darkness of the north. Gudrun stood near the window, watching, waiting, listening. Then she heard it. A distant sound, faint at first, almost imagined. Hoofbeats. Her heart leapt. She held her breath. The sound grew louder, steady, rhythmic, approaching through the darkness. Closer, closer, closer. Relief washed through her. She smiled for the first time in days. He came. The words escaped her lips before she realized it. He came. The horse emerged from the darkness, a black silhouette against the snow. A rider sat upon its back, tall, straight, motionless. Gudrun hurried outside. The cold struck her immediately, yet she barely noticed. Her eyes remained fixed upon the approaching figure. Something felt strange, but excitement drowned the warning. The rider stopped before her. For a moment, neither spoke. The horse stood perfectly still. No steam rose from its nostrils. No sound escaped it. Gudrun found this odd, yet not odd enough. Not yet. Joknin? The figure nodded slowly. Moonlight touched his face, and suddenly a chill passed through her. His skin looked pale, far paler than she remembered. His eyes seemed darker, shadowed, distant, as though he were looking at her from very far away. Still, it was him, wasn't it? The familiar shape, the familiar voice, the familiar presence. She pushed her unease aside. Perhaps the journey had exhausted him. Perhaps grief and worry had clouded her judgment. I feared something had happened. The rider remained silent. Then at last he spoke. His voice sounded strange, soft, hollow, as though carried from somewhere beyond the wind. Come. Only a single word, yet it sent a tremor through her heart. Come. Nothing more. No explanation, no greeting, no smile, no apology. Only that one word. Come. The old stories say that fate often gives us warnings. Small warnings, subtle warnings. Moments when some deeper instinct recognizes danger before the mind does. Gudrun felt such a warning then. A brief hesitation, a flicker of doubt. But love has a way of silencing caution. And she loved him. So she mounted the horse behind him, wrapped her arms around his waist, and together they rode into the darkness. Away from the lights, away from the safety of home, away from the world of the living, towards something ancient, something terrible, something waiting beneath the polar night. At first, the journey seemed normal. The horse moved steadily across the snow. The moon hung low above the mountains. Stars glittered overhead like frozen fire. The valley stretched endlessly before them, silent, beautiful, empty. Yet little by little, Gudrun became aware of unsettling details. The DEACON never spoke, not once, not even when she addressed him. His body felt strangely rigid beneath her hands. His clothes seemed damp, cold, far colder than they should have been. The horse itself moved unnaturally, without hesitation, without fatigue, without sound. The further they traveled, the stronger her unease became. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, and deep within her soul, she knew it, yet she could not name it. Not yet. Ahead of them, the river waited, hidden beneath ice, hidden beneath snow, hidden beneath darkness, waiting. The horse moved onward through the darkness. Its hooves touched the frozen earth so lightly that at times Gudrun wondered whether they touched the ground at all. The valley lay silent around them, not the peaceful silence of a sleeping world. This was a different kind of silence, a silence that seemed to listen, the kind of silence one encounters only in the deepest wilderness or beside a deathbed. Above them, the moon drifted between torn clouds. Its pale light washed the mountains in silver. Snowfields glowed faintly. The frozen river shimmered in the distance like a scar across the valley floor. Gudrun tightened her grip around the DEACON's waist. His body felt unnaturally cold, colder than the winter air, colder than the snow itself. At first, she tried to dismiss the thought. Perhaps his clothes had frozen. Perhaps he had traveled for hours through the storm. Perhaps exhaustion explained everything. But doubt had already taken root, and once planted, doubt grows quickly in darkness. "Are you well?" she asked softly. No answer. The rider continued forward, motionless, silent, as though he had not heard her. Gudrun swallowed. A strange unease tightened in her chest. The DEACON had never ignored her before. Never. Not once. Even during disagreements, even during difficult conversations, there had always been warmth in him, a gentleness, a humanity. But the figure riding before her felt distant, foreign, like a memory wearing his shape. The valley widened before them. The mountains drew back. The sky seemed impossibly vast overhead. Millions of stars burned in the darkness. Cold stars, ancient stars. Watching. Gudrun found herself glancing repeatedly at the back of his head, at the outline of his shoulders, searching for reassurance, searching for something familiar. But every passing minute deepened her discomfort. the horse never stumbled, never hesitated, never slowed. Its pace remained perfectly steady, unnaturally steady, as though neither rider nor horse belonged entirely to the living world. The wind rose briefly. Snow drifted across their path. A loose strand of Gudrun's hair blew across her face. As she brushed it aside, her eyes fell upon the deacon's hands. And for the first time, genuine fear entered her heart. His fingers looked wrong. The moonlight revealed skin pale as old bone. Not pale from winter, not pale from cold, pale from death. She blinked, looked again. The hands were hidden beneath his sleeves once more. Perhaps she had imagined it. Surely she had imagined it. Yet the image lingered, burned into her mind. The horse descended toward the river. A sudden chill swept through Gudrun. She knew this place. Everyone in the district knew it. The crossing. Even in daylight, travelers approached it with caution. Now it waited before them beneath moonlight and snow. Silent, still, watching. The horse stepped onto the frozen surface. Gudrun shivered. The ice groaned faintly beneath them. A deep sound, a distant sound, like something awakening beneath the river. Then she noticed another detail, something far more disturbing. The horse left no tracks. Her breath caught. She twisted in the saddle. The snow behind them remained smooth and untouched, pristine, as though no horse had passed there, as though no riders existed. For a moment, her mind refused to accept what her eyes saw. It made no sense, none at all. Yet there it was. The snow remained unmarked, a white sheet stretching endlessly behind them. Untouched by hoof, untouched by man, untouched by life. Fear rose within her like icy water, slowly, relentlessly. She wanted to speak, wanted to ask questions, wanted to demand answers. But suddenly she was afraid of hearing them. The moon emerged fully from the clouds. Its pale light flooded the valley. And then it happened. The deacon spoke without warning, without turning his head. His voice drifted through the darkness, soft, distant, as though carried from another world. And he sang, not loudly, not joyfully, but with a strange sorrow that seemed older than the mountains themselves. His voice floated across the frozen landscape, a haunting melody, a melody that chilled Gudrun to her very soul. The moon shines high above tonight. The dead ride silent in its light. The words hung in the cold air. Gudrun froze. Every hair upon her body stood upright. Something inside her knew before her mind could understand, knew before reason could intervene. This was wrong, terribly wrong. The voice continued, low, melancholy, unnatural. Each word seemed to emerge from a great distance, as though spoken from the bottom of a frozen river, as though carried upward through ice and darkness. Gudrun's heart hammered violently. She stared at the figure before her, at the rigid posture, at the deathly stillness, at the impossible cold. And suddenly all the pieces aligned. The silence, the pale hands, the missing tracks, the frozen body, the strange voice, the unanswered questions, the promise. The promise. I will return for you. A terrible realization swept through her, not like a thought, like a wound. The deacon had kept his promise, but not as a living man. The horse continued across the river, the rider continued singing, and Gudrun finally gathered the courage to look directly at his face. Slowly, very slowly. The deacon turned toward her. Moonlight touched his features, and she saw the truth. The eyes staring back at her no longer belonged to the living. They were dark, sunken, filled with an unbearable sadness. River water glistened upon his cheeks. Frozen crystals clung to his beard. His skin looked gray beneath the moon. Not the face of a traveler, not the face of a lover. The face of a drowned man, the face of death. Gudrun nearly screamed. The sound died in her throat. Her entire body trembled. The figure smiled. A faint smile, a terrible smile, one touched by grief, one touched by madness, one touched by the grave. Then he spoke, and the words that emerged would echo through Icelandic folklore for centuries. "Do you not know me, Gudrun?" His voice sounded hollow, broken, like ice cracking beneath winter weight. "Have you forgotten me already?" Tears filled her eyes, not from sorrow, from terror, because she knew. At last she truly knew. The man she loved was dead, and she was riding through the polar night upon the horse of a ghost. For a long moment, neither moved, neither spoke. The world itself seemed to pause. The moon hung motionless above the valley. The mountains stood frozen in silent witness. Even the wind appeared to retreat. Only Gudrun's heart moved, hammering wildly against her ribs. The sound thundered inside her ears. She stared into the eyes of the man she had loved and saw death staring back. Not hatred, not anger. Something far worse. Longing. A terrible, endless longing. The longing of a soul that could not let go. The longing of the dead for the warmth of the living. Water glistened upon his face. Dark water. River water. Drops fell from his beard and disappeared into the snow without a sound. His smile widened slightly. Not with joy. Not with malice. But with unbearable sadness, as though he too understood the horror of what he had become. Gudrun. Her name emerged from his lips like a sigh carried upward from a grave. The sound struck her heart with painful familiarity, for beneath the coldness, beneath the terror, beneath the death itself, there remained traces of the man she had loved. That was the cruelest part. Had he been a monster, she could have hated him. Had he been a demon, she could have fled immediately. But he was neither. He was the DEACON. And yet, he was not. Something broken. Something trapped. Something caught between worlds. The horse continued forward. Its hooves glided silently across the frozen river, still leaving no tracks, still casting no shadow. Gudrun felt panic rising within her. She needed to escape. Immediately. Every instinct screamed the same warning. Leave. Run. Live. Yet terror had frozen her. She could barely breathe. The ghost continued to watch her, his eyes dark and endless beneath the moonlight. Then, slowly, he turned forward once more, and the horse accelerated. Not gradually, not naturally. Suddenly. Violently. The frozen landscape began rushing past. Snow and darkness blurred together. The mountains seemed to move. The stars wheeled overhead. The horse ran faster than any living horse could run. Far faster. Its hooves scarcely touched the earth. The valley itself appeared to bend around them. Gudrun clung desperately to the saddle. Fear overwhelmed every thought, every prayer, every memory. All that remained was survival. The old women of Iceland often spoke of certain moments when fate places a knife edge beneath your feet. One step toward life, one step toward death. Nothing in between. Gudrun stood upon such an edge now, and somewhere beneath her terror, beneath the chaos of her thoughts, a memory surfaced. A memory from childhood, her grandmother's voice, soft and weathered, telling stories beside the fire, stories of spirits, stories of revenants, stories of the dead who could not rest, and one warning repeated again and again. Never let the dead take hold of you. Never surrender yourself willingly, because once they claim you, they never release you. The horse thundered onward. Ahead, rising from the darkness, Gudrun suddenly saw a faint light, a single light, small, golden, beautiful, a farmhouse, or perhaps a church. She could not tell, only that it belonged to the living. Hope exploded within her. The ghost saw it too. Instantly his posture changed. The horse veered away away from the light, away from safety, away from salvation. A low sound escaped his throat. Not a word, not a human voice, something older, something darker. For the first time, genuine malice entered the night, and Gudrun understood. Whatever remained of the deacon did not wish to approach holy ground. The realization gave her strength, strength born of desperation, strength found only in those moments when survival demands action. Her fingers tightened, her muscles tensed. She measured the distance, measured the speed, measured the risk. Then she acted, without warning, without hesitation. She threw herself sideways. The world exploded. Snow, ice, pain, darkness. She struck the ground hard. The impact drove the breath from her lungs. For several moments she could neither see nor think. The stars spun above her. The earth rolled beneath her. Everything hurt. Everything. Yet she was alive. Alive. The horse screamed. A terrible sound. Not the scream of an animal, the scream of something ancient and furious. Gudrun struggled upright. Her legs trembled. The cold bit into her flesh. Ahead of her, the ghost had halted. The horse stood motionless. The deacon turned slowly. Moonlight illuminated his face, and what she saw there would haunt her forever. Not rage, not hatred, heartbreak, infinite heartbreak. The expression of a man who had lost everything. The expression of a soul condemned to wander alone. For one terrible moment, pity pierced her fear. She remembered the warm hands, the laughter, the dreams they had shared, the life that should have been, the children they would never have, the years stolen from them, the future buried beneath the river. Tears streamed down her face. DEACON. His dead eyes met hers, and for an instant, something changed. A flicker, a spark, a final remnant of the man he had once been. The wind fell silent. The valley held its breath. Then the ghost spoke, one final time. His voice no longer sounded monstrous, no longer sounded hollow. It sounded tired, anciently tired, like a soul exhausted by grief. Pray for me. Only 3 words, yet they carried all the sorrow of the world. Pray for me. The horse began to fade, not vanish instantly. Fade. Like mist beneath morning sunlight, the rider faded with it. The outline of his body grew transparent. The darkness within his eyes softened. The terrible tension left his face, and for the briefest moment, Gudrun thought she saw him as he had once been. Alive, young, hopeful, standing beneath summer skies, smiling. Then the vision disappeared. The valley became empty. The horse vanished. The rider vanished. The ghost vanished. Only snow remained. Snow, moonlight, and silence. The profound silence that follows tragedy. Gudrun collapsed to her knees. Her body shook uncontrollably, from cold, from grief, from terror, from relief. She wept beneath the stars, wept for the man she had loved, wept for the life they would never share, wept for the promise that death itself had failed to break. Far away, church bells began to ring, Christmas bells. Their sound drifted across the frozen valley, gentle, sacred, comforting, the sound of the living world calling her home. And for the first time that night, Gudrun knew she would survive, though a part of her heart would forever remain beside a frozen river beneath the polar night. The bells continued ringing across the valley, slow, measured, sacred. Their voices drifted through the darkness and echoed against the mountains before fading into the vast silence of the winter night. Gudrun remained kneeling in the snow long after the apparition had vanished. Her tears froze upon her cheeks. The cold gnawed at her hands, yet she scarcely felt it. Part of her still expected to see him, still expected the ghostly rider to emerge once more from the darkness, still expected to hear the familiar voice calling her name. But the valley remained empty. Only the moon watched from above, and the snow carried no answers. When the people of the nearby farm found her the following morning, she was barely conscious. A shepherd discovered her first. He had been checking livestock after sunrise when he noticed a dark shape against the snow. At first, he thought it was a fallen bundle, perhaps a cloak, perhaps a dead sheep. Then the shape moved, slowly, weakly, and he realized it was a woman. The alarm spread quickly. Within the hour, Gudrun lay wrapped in blankets beside a warm fire while anxious faces surrounded her. Questions came immediately. What had happened? Why had she been alone? Where had she come from? What had she seen? At first, she could not answer, not because she wished to hide the truth, but because words seemed incapable of carrying what she had experienced. How does one explain that the dead had come riding through the darkness? How does one explain a promise that survived the grave? How does one explain the look in a drowned man's eyes? Eventually, she spoke, quietly, carefully, and as her story unfolded, the room grew silent. No one interrupted. No one laughed. No one dismissed her account, because these were not modern people living in a modern world. These were people who understood that winter carried mysteries, people who had listened to strange sounds in the mountains, people who had witnessed things they never spoke about publicly, people who knew there were corners of creation where the living and the dead sometimes brushed against one another. When Gudrun finished, nobody spoke for a long time. The fire crackled, the wind sighed against the walls, and each person present silently made the sign of the cross. A search party rode out that same day. The river crossing was examined again. This time they searched farther downstream. Hours passed. The daylight faded. Then someone shouted. The men gathered quickly. There, trapped beneath ice along a bend in the river, lay the body of the deacon. The river had finally surrendered its secret. They brought him ashore with great care. The men removed their hats. No one spoke. Even the horses seemed subdued. The young deacon looked strangely peaceful. Death had erased the terror of his final moments. Snow rested upon his cloak. Ice crystals glittered in his beard. His eyes remained closed, as though he merely slept. But everyone present knew the truth. The river had taken him, and nothing could return what had been lost. News traveled quickly through the district. Grief settled over the valley like another snowfall. The deacon had been loved, respected, admired. His death touched nearly every household. The church filled on the day of his funeral. Farmers traveled great distances despite difficult weather. Families arrived by horse, by foot, by sled. No one wished to stay away. The little church could scarcely contain them all. Gudrun sat near the front, dressed in black, her face pale, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights. She listened as prayers were spoken. She listened as the minister spoke of faith, of eternity, of God's mercy. Yet her thoughts remained elsewhere. She remembered a snowy evening, a warm fire, a promise, and a rider emerging from darkness. When the coffin was finally lowered into the earth, the winter sun briefly appeared. Only for a moment. Only a thin shaft of golden light breaking through the clouds. Yet many people remembered it. Some called it coincidence. Others called it a sign. The old women of the district would later claim that the deacon's troubled soul had finally found peace. Perhaps they were right, perhaps not. The dead keep their secrets. Years passed, as years always do. The seasons continued their endless cycle. Winter yielded to spring, spring yielded to summer, summer surrendered to autumn, and the world moved forward. New children were born. Old people died. Farmhouses changed hands. The valley endured. Yet some stories refused to fade. This was one of them. The tale of Gudrun and the drowned deacon spread far beyond the district where it began. Travelers carried it from farm to farm. Storytellers repeated it beside fires. Fishermen shared it during long winter nights. Each generation added details. Each generation polished the edges. But the heart of the story remained unchanged. A promise, a death, a ride through darkness, and a love strong enough to cross the boundary between worlds. Many years later, when Gudrun herself had grown old, a young child once asked her whether the story was true. The question caught her by surprise. For a long time, she said nothing. She simply gazed through the window at the mountains beyond, mountains she had known her entire life, mountains that had witnessed everything. At last, she smiled sadly. "The dead are God's business," she said softly. "And stories belong to those who hear them." The child frowned. "That isn't an answer." "No." A faint smile touched her lips. "It isn't." The child persisted. "Did you really ride with him?" Gudrun looked toward the distant river, toward the place where her life had changed forever, toward the place where memory and legend had become one. And for a brief moment, she thought she saw a lone rider standing far away beneath the winter sky. A trick of the light. Perhaps. Or perhaps not. The North has always guarded its mysteries carefully. "I will tell you this," she said. "When someone gives you their heart, treasure it." The child waited. "Why?" Gudrun's eyes softened. "Because life is shorter than we believe." And so the story survived, not because of the ghost, not because of fear, not even because of death. It survived because it spoke of something older and more powerful: love, loss, memory, the things that make us human, the things that outlive us. Even now, when winter settles across Iceland and the wind wanders through lonely valleys, some still remember the tale. And on certain nights, when the moon hangs high above frozen rivers and the darkness feels deeper than usual, people lower their voices and glance toward the window. Just for a moment, just in case. Because somewhere beneath the polar night, the old stories still ride, and some promises once given are never truly broken. Thank you for listening to The Deacon of Dark River. This haunting tale is one of Iceland's most famous and enduring folk legends, passed down through generations during the long winter nights of the North. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Nordic Skald and leave a like. Here you'll discover many more unforgettable tales inspired by Icelandic folklore, Nordic legends, ancient mysteries, and even true events drawn from Iceland's rich and fascinating history. Until next time, keep the fire burning, listen closely to the whispers of the polar night, and remember, the old stories are never truly gone.